Welcome back to another episode of the Collaborative IEP podcast. I'm Ashley Barlow, your host, and I'm so happy you're here. So, we're going to talk today about something that came up when I was speaking to a school district last week, and something that came up in several of my cases over the last year. I did a little bit of a frustrating deep dive on it and landed back at the same place. And so I called my own Department of Education, the Kentucky Department of Education, and had a very validating conversation. And so we're going to talk about that today on the podcast. And that topic is modifications. The larger topic is modifications to general education curriculum. And we're going to talk about how assessments get modified, what goes in the grade book, what extent of modifications is there an extent that is too much, et cetera, et cetera. If you usually watch on YouTube, you're not getting YouTube, or you are getting YouTube, but you aren't getting any video today. I am in traffic. You might have noticed you did not get a podcast last week. Things are kind of unraveling and maybe starting to re-ravel. Remember that Green Day song? I don't know if you're allowed to sing songs. I might not. They don't have the rights to it. But, it was like, if you want to destroy my sweater, pull this thread as I walk away. Things are unraveling and maybe being knit back together for the Jack man at school. This is as much as I feel comfortable sharing. But I have spent a very large amount of time knitting, so to speak. And so last week I went into deep into knitting for Jack, let's call it. Who knew I was going to make that analogy, but now you're stuck with it. And so today I had planned to record your podcast. And, life happens. This is why whenever my team suggests things to me, I always push back and I'm like, I can't. My life is just not predictable in a way that I can show up, for example, show up weekly at noon for a membership meeting or something. So today I thought I would do this really quick errand of dropping a bunch of clothes off to be consigned for the first time in my life. And here I am 2 hours later and only $107 richer. Frustrated and honestly offended. I feel like that's probably relatable. I feel like a lot of people that have done that are relatable. Like, I have really cute clothes, and they must not have thought so because they didn't want to buy any. Anyway, maybe they still smell like the skunk. My dog got sprayed by a skunk. So you aren't getting visual today, but you are getting a podcast, and beggars can't be choosers. So modifications is what we're going to talk about. So last week I had the honor of speaking to a high school in Tennessee, Elizabethton High School in rural Tennessee. I think it's rural. I think they would say it's rural. And a teacher, they do just this incredible job at inclusivity, and it brought me down to really kind of start to explore this idea of inclusive education and, are we violating principles of universal design and stuff like that. And it's really just, they've got great stuff going on. And I hope I get to continue to partner with them. And as an aside, if you would like for me to come speak to yours, I did not intend this to be an advertisement, but if you would like for me to come speak with your organization or to your school, simply reach out to me and we'll set it up. So I was asked there about modifications, and I also have been in a few different cases and have been contacted as recently as yesterday by somebody at a disability organization that goes to meetings for students saying, we need to talk about modifications. And so over the last 2 weeks, basically, 2 weeks, I have been like, am I wrong about this? Basically, And so I want to talk about modifications. So as you know, and as we go into much more detail about in the inclusion workshop, students cannot be removed from the general education environment solely because of modifications that they need in general education. There's a great Dear Colleague letter on that called Gantt work if you need it. But I have been hearing from multiple people in multiple states with kids with various disabilities, diagnoses, disability categories, impact of disability, like a wide variety of cases that are saying two things. Number one, we don't know how much is too much modification. And number two, or like as a spinoff of number one, is there such thing as too much modification? Like, in other words, is it appropriate to be modifying to the point that the students, quote unquote, aren't learning, which I've heard a lot? Or, is there, okay, so that's a spinoff of A. And then number two, how do you grade? If significant modifications are done, how do you grade? And I think I know the answer. But the answer, like, I don't have a source for the answer, although I will tell you, I have read this repeatedly in textbooks. This is also an aside, but it's probably also relatable. My friend Sarah Plattenberg and I talk about this all the time. She's an educational advocate in EAC, advocate. What's the C? She's in Northern Virginia. They also have a firm in Chicago, and they're amazing. And Sarah and I are always like, now I'm into this thing where I want to go get a PhD in ed psych. Sarah says she wants to get a PhD and do her research on, she wants to get an EdD and get her research on choice exceptionality. And then I always land at, it's too expensive. We wouldn't make any more money with a PhD because of what we do. And we're going to get smarter, yes, but we can also get smarter by reading all the books. And so I just go back to university bookstores and buy the next books. So when I record a podcast in traffic, there's a lot of tangential comments. So I have read a lot of textbooks, and I have read this in a lot of textbooks that are for pre-service teachers, right? Like what you learn when you were studying a master's or a bachelor's degree in special education is the answer to number one is there really is no such thing as too much modification. As long as you can modify the content down to that student's level and it's meaningful, then have at it. So an example I gave in a conversation with a client today is if a student is working on multiplying fractions, well, a first step to multiplying fractions is multiplication. And so if they know that we're working on multiplication and the foundational step to multiplying fractions is multiplying single digit numbers, then you're working on single digit numbers. And if you need to use a calculator for that, then the learning process for you is this X or this dot means times, and here it is on the calculator. You've taken math calculation out of it, but you've got math reasoning because you can identify that this is a calculator problem. And, if you can, or a foundational skill might be like what a fraction is. And so if you can identify that fractions are like parts of a sum, parts of a whole, and we're teaching it to that extent, and then we're multiplying fractions, or at least we're adding fractions together to be like a half and a half, or, a half times a half is a quarter, and you can figure that out with manipulatives, then that is appropriate. That is not too modified down, so to speak. And I say modified down just for simplicity, right? Like that's not it. But what I'm saying is it's not overly simplified, and that is still best practice. So as is always the case, like this has to be a very, very individualized discussion. And what I'm seeing a lot is that students want access to those 4 core classes, language arts, math, science, and social studies, because more because of the environment, right? So the socialization, the structure, the quietness, the predictability, those things are attractive, but the content is indeed difficult. And, in the inclusion workshop, I gave you little ideas like make sure you say out loud, like set the hard boundary of, listen, I don't expect that we are going to learn that he's going to have to memorize all 206 bones in the human body. I think there's probably more, but that's what I learned in 5th grade with a mnemonic. But the mnemonic wouldn't help you. It was the room number of the 6th grade or the 7th grade science teacher. So my teacher was like, when you get up there, Mr. Higgins' room is 206, and you can remember that there's 206 bones in the human body. But it still worked. You know what else we learned that I impressed somebody with the other day? Xylem up, phloem down. So like celery and carrots, they're like, you see the little tubes that like carry the nutrients in the water to the plant, the vegetable. Those are xylem and phloem tubes. And xylem carry stuff up and phloem carries stuff down. This teacher had all kinds of things like that. I can also do the Roman numerals if you want to know that one. I, V, X, L, C, D, M. There's a Roman numerals order. I can go on, but I won't. And I totally digress. And I'm going to get so many messages from you guys about this. So, okay. Come back to the earth. I have almost reached the bridge to Kentucky. And then we only have like 6 more minutes together. And I got to go. I got to go eat my taco. So, you're saying to me, I agree, Ashley, I agree, but my district says that's not right. And that's kind of what was happening to me. I was having these conversations with people. Oh, okay, let me answer B. So what goes in the gradebook is the modified assessment, right? If you modify the work, then you modify the assessment. And that means modifying the volume, the difficulty, the means of assessment, right? It can be nonverbal, it can be verbal, it can be kinesthetic. I always say, like, I'm a lawyer in Kentucky. You can like write something on a cow and send it my direction. Like, can a kid write their answers on a cow and send it to, sure, heck, I don't care. Just, do you know it? Do you know it? That's the question for me. Now, if you get a 2 out of 5, that's a 40% on that. I think. I'm bad at math, but I think. But it's a 2 out of 5, right? Like, you don't just automatically get 100 because it's modified. But still, the point is, the grade that goes in the grade book is that modified grade, the grade on the modified work, not, okay, this is going to be like a hard cut, and you're going to continue to laugh because now it's tomorrow. And I am going to make absolutely no attempt to splice into what I recorded yesterday in traffic. But I do have the next part of this analysis that I want to give you to finish up this episode. What happened yesterday was I got the new phone, like, I don't know, iPhone 825, whatever it is, 17. I have no idea. And I think there must be, it has that like side button. And I think I must be touching it and stopping videos. And so I got all the way to the Mexican restaurant to meet Brandon for dinner and thought that I had not recorded any of what I had just said to you. And honestly, I thought that episode was good because it was like just my random, excitable thoughts with really poor audio quality. And I was like really sad that it was gone because I thought I'll never be able to recreate that randomness. And then today I popped on to see if I needed to record something new, and there was 13 minutes on there. So anyway, I'm going to leave it. I'm going to leave it as it is because it was random, but I am not going to try to tie into it. And I hope my audio is a little bit better today. I have a feeling that my car audio picked that up. So maybe it feels like you were talking to me in the car. Anyway, if you're talking to me, that's probably where I am. And 9 times out of 10, Jack is piping up in the background. So, okay. So, I had alluded to what I think the next question is, and that is, when you're like, yeah, I agree with you, Ashley, but like my district says this is not true. So, where I have sent a few people in the last couple of weeks is to their state Department of Education to say, like, basically, the questions are, is there an extent of modification that is too much? And the answer is no. And also, is there a a mandate that students have to be provided with the general education tier 1 assessments? And the answer to that, of course, is no. And so then, like, the more overarching question is, well, then what's appropriate? And what's appropriate is the least restrictive environment, right? Like, as determined by the IEP team. So then you go back to those things that you have to consider in 34 CFR 300.116, which is the regulation that gives you the factors to consider when you're looking at least restrictive environment. So, I think getting an email or an opinion from your state Department of Education could go really far in doing this. And then, in light of the fact, unfortunately, that states are going to be, monitoring and implementing and overseeing and researching and all and undertaking so much more in terms of IDEA and special education law, if IDEA doesn't exist, then, I think it's really important that we're also telling our state departments about this. So at any rate, I think that's just something that has come up so much recently, and I don't know why it's come up so much, but I hope that gives you a little bit of, like, of the mystery in my head, and honestly, the randomness of this episode is kind of how random it is. Like, I've talked to so many advocates about this in the last couple of weeks, because as I said, I've had clients in multiple states that have faced this issue, and I'm like, am I out of my mind? Like, is everything I thought to be true not true? So, I hope that that helps you and provides you the answer. If you want a deeper dive into modifications and accommodations and how they impact LRE and inclusion, my inclusion workshop goes into this further with actual cites to the regulations. It goes into a lot of the different guidance documents and Dear Colleague letters. So that would be a great place to start or to take a deeper dive if this is your starting pad. So I will see you next week, same time, same place. I hope you have a great week.